It's officially combine season, so that means we get really excited for these prospects. It gives us a good break between playoff football and the NFL draft. For a lot of these players, it's a make or break weekend. Athleticism means so much when you're going to the next level, so it's always fun to see these guys compete at the highest level and try to make themselves some money this weekend. If you guys are interested in watching the combine, but you feel like you don't have any direction or you don't know exactly who to watch, this video is made just for you. I'm going to give you guys my top 5 things I'm looking for this weekend. We're going to take a look at 3 different positions: cornerback, defensive line, as well as linebacker today. I'm going to give you guys the key things that I'm looking for this weekend at those positions and the players that are most interesting to me right now. Taking a look at the cornerback group first, I'm most excited about Christian Gonzalez this weekend. I know he's a super fluid athlete on tape, and I've heard some rumblings about him running a 4.3 at the combine. I'm very interested in his 40. I'm very interested in his height and weight. He comes in at like 6'2", 200 pounds. He's a little bit on the slimmer side, so I'd like to just get some clarification as to what his height and weight actually is. And then lastly, I'm excited about the field drills. He looks so smooth on tape. I just want to see him create some distance between CB2 and just look like the best CB this weekend. Next up, we got Devon Witherspoon. He's right in contention with CB1. He has some phenomenal tape. I'm really interested to see what his height and weight is. He's also on the slimmer side. I'd also be interested to see how long his arms are. I'm not exactly sure how fast he is, so that's why we're excited about the 40 time for him. I know he's fast, but I don't know exactly how fast. If he runs in the 4.3s, that'd be an excellent time for him. And then lastly for him, we want to see the agility test. This is super important for cornerbacks, but also it looked like he was a little bit stiff on tape. Nothing concerning, but we want to see some good testing numbers here. Next up, we got Joey Porter Jr., another player who could be the CB1 in this class. I'm very interested to see how long his arms are. His arms look like he should be 7 feet tall. I'd like to just get a number on that. I'm also curious to see what his 40 time is. If he could run under a 4.45 maybe, I think that would be a beautiful time. He's a little bit longer, a little bit bigger, and his speed doesn't necessarily stick out on tape all the time, so we want to just get some clarification here. And then lastly, again, we want to see the agility test. Super important test for these cornerbacks. He's a bigger guy, so you want to be able to see some good agility scores here, especially if he's going to be like a top 15 pick. Next up, we got Tyreek Stevenson. He's a bigger guy. He had some amazing tape. I really like what I saw. I'm curious to see what his weight is. He looks a little thick and he's not super tall, so I'm just curious to see what that is. Next up, I want to see his arm length. He doesn't look like he has huge arms, which is pretty important for the cornerback position. And then lastly, I want to see his 40 time. If he runs a slow 40, kind of tough to see how these guys will project to the NFL. And then lastly, for the cornerbacks, one of my favorite players in Deonte Banks. I'm very curious to see what his height and weight is. He looks like a really big guy on tape. He also looks like a really good athlete. I want to see what his vertical is, as well as his broad jump. He looks like an explosive player. And then lastly, because he's a big guy, I want to see his agility. Hopefully he scores well there. Moving on to the defensive line, we have Will McDonald. I'm super excited about this guy right now. I think his stock's only going to rise from this point on. He looks like he's going to test like a maniac. He is a little bit undersized, so I'm curious to see what his arm length is. He plays with a little bit more finesse than strength, so I want to see his bench press. And then lastly, I want to see what his weight actually is. Next up, I'm curious to see what Tyree Wilson's arm length is. Everyone says he has some crazy long arms. I want to see the actual number on it. He's a big fella at 6'6", 275-ish pounds. I want to see how agile he is. He has a very good power rusher. I want to see if he has a little bit of agility to his game as well. And then lastly, I want to see what his 40 time is. He looks like he has really good burst off the line, but his 40 time is just a number I'm curious about. Next up, we have Brian Brzee. I'm very curious to see what his medicals look like. He's been banged up throughout his college career. Hopefully he gets a green light. Next, I want to see his bench press. I've heard some really good things about Brian Brzee's strength. They said he was the strongest one in the gym. I want to see a number on that bench press. And then lastly, I want to see his agility. He's a very powerful rusher. I want to see if he's got some loose hips. I want to see if he can score well in like the 3-cone drill. Next up, we got Brian Brzee's teammate, Miles Murphy. Today in interviews, he claimed that he could run a 4.45. I know he's a freak athlete. I know that he's a pretty agile guy. I want to see the numbers on his agility scores here. A really good 3-cone could help out his draft stock. And then lastly, I want to see his arm length. It looks like he has really long arms, but I'm just curious to see a number on it. At 6'5", you'd like to see some really long arms. That way we can project him to be a dominant edge rusher at the next level. Lastly, we got Kalijah Cansey. Today in interviews, he said that we're going to be surprised by his 40 time. I want to see what he's talking about. He's also a bit undersized. I really want to see what kind of strength he's playing with. I'd love to see his bench press. And then lastly, because he's such a small guy, I'd like to see his arm length. Of course, I'd like to see his weight as well. But arm length is very important, especially when you're a smaller guy. Even though length isn't his game, I'm curious to just see how long they are. Moving on to linebacker, My linebacker 1 is Drew Sanders. He is a freak athlete. He transferred from Alabama to Arkansas. I'm curious to see what his 40 time is. He's a big fella but moves really well. I'd also like to see his agility test. Because he's so big, we want to see him be able to move fluidly. And then just out of curiosity, I want to see his broad jump as well as his vertical. I know that he's a freak athlete. He shows some really freaky things on tape. Just out of curiosity, I want to see how he does in these areas. Our third Clemson Tiger on the list, Trenton Simpson. He said that he's a 4.4 runner. We'll see what his 40 time looks like. He doesn't always play with the most strength, so I'm curious to see what his bench press looks like. And then lastly, because he's such an athlete, I want to see the lower body explosive workouts, the broad jump as well as the vert. I think he's going to score really well in these areas. Next up, we got Jack Campbell. He's probably LB3 in this class. He's a really good run stuffer, but we don't know too much about him. I'm curious to see what his agility tests look like, and then I want to see him in the field drills. Does he look the part as a starting inside linebacker? And then lastly, he doesn't look the fastest, so I'm curious to see what the 40 time looks like. I don't know if I'll pronounce this right, but Diane Henley from Washington State. He had a really good Senior Bowl, and he's said to be a really freaky athlete, like super rare athleticism. He is a little bit thinner, so I want to see what his weight looks like. Next, because he's such an athlete, I want to see what his broad jump as well as his vertical looks like. And then out of curiosity, I want to see what that 40 time is. He has really good sideline to sideline speed, so I want to see a number to it. Lastly, we have Oregon's linebacker, Noah Sewell. There are some weight concerns. He's a little bit shorter in height, but he's all the way up at 250 plus pounds. I want to get an actual number on his weight. I don't want that to be a concern moving forward. Next up, he looks pretty slow on tape. I want to see what the 40 time looks like. I don't expect him to be a 4.4 guy, probably not even 4.5, and I think that's okay. I'm just curious to see what the number is. And then lastly, the field drills will be important for this guy. Does he look like he moves real fluid? And does he fit in well with the linebacker group that are going to be there? All right, fellas, those are the things that I'm looking for in those position groups. Now, if you didn't see a name on my list, it doesn't mean I'm not looking for it. I'll actually continue in the description down below with more things that I'm looking for. I'm going to be watching every single event, and I'm going to be super tuned in with every single player. The ones that I listed today are just the ones that are most exciting to me. And probably the next day or two, I'm going to come out with an offensive video as well. So if you guys are interested in following along with me, I suggest you hit the subscribe button down below, and I'll catch you in the next one.